Can you just talk about the John Major plane incident? Because I've read about it, but I've never actually heard you say what actually happened in 1997.
Well, I mean, it seems like another era now, really. Of course it was. I think it was a news story about, I mean, I can understand the kernel of the story looking back on it. I mean, what actually happened was, you know, I'd had a heroin problem in 1997. I'd had a heroin problem on and off for 18 years, so it was no news to me. You know, I mean, it was so no news to me that the fact that I was covering John Major's campaign and was going on the press jet from RAF Northolt up to the Midlands, where he was touring a JCB factory, and I mean, it meant nothing to me. I mean,
but what did you do? Did you ever smoke or snort, or how did it?
I think I wasn't injecting at that time. I think I was snorting it. So I had some before I left home. I wasn't even thinking about it. I went to Smith Square for the briefing, took notes, interviewed people, got on this plane, the press plane. A lot of people in the press pack knew me. I mean, I was sort of reasonably well known on Fleet Street by then. Went and sat, I was sitting with John Sopel, I think, from the BBC, who actually I'd been at school with. And I wasn't thinking about it at all. I mean, after we took off, I did realise I still had some smack on me, so I thought I'd better go to the loo and get rid of this, which I did. And there was a guy from the Express, I think he was called Simon something or other, I can't really remember his name. Anyway, it was him who, because as far as I was concerned, the rest of the day just, I mean, I had a habit, so I wasn't that stoned or anything.
So topping up.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you've got a heroin habit, you use it to function. You don't necessarily use it to get high. I mean, I sort of interviewed the head of the CBI, I think, that day, or something, various people. I mean, nobody sort of in these interviews was saying, "Whoa, you're a bit off your tits." And I went home and filed my copy. And I never really thought about it. I mean, lots of people spoke to me that day. But this guy from the Express had spotted something, or, you know, he kind of knew about my reputation. The Observer pushed me very much as some, in those days, as somebody who, you know, was druggy, and, you know, I remember they'd run above their masthead a few weeks previously, Will Self back on drugs again. You know, so it was being, for me, the hypocrisy of the Observer and the Guardian, who then fired me over this, was that they'd actually been marketing me as some kind of, you know, latter-day Hunter Thompson. So I then thought nothing of it. I went to my brother's house in Ireland over the weekend, and when I got back the following week, the road outside of my house was full of news crews, and, you know, this guy had gone and pushed the story to, I think, Tory Central Office, and it got on the wire, and, you know, it gathered momentum. And then it was a miserable little week, really. I mean, I had children who were kind of old enough already to know that something was going on. But of course, you know, the reality of these things is, you know, I think, apart from Will Hutton, who was my immediate editor of The Observer, the kind of chief editor, you know, the way that the newspapers behaved around it was pretty disgusting, you know. The reality of the situation...
Were you hung out to dry by various people?
Well, they said to me, you know, I denied it initially, as you might well do. Yeah. And then they wanted me to sign an affidavit after a couple of days, because they felt it had become a political story about their probity. They were backing New Labour. They felt it was, you know, damaging the cause. And at that point, I wasn't, even though I couldn't see for the life of me how they could have any concrete evidence. And in a way, of course, part of me wishes I'd stuck to my denial, because I probably could have got away with it. But
so do you wish you had stuck to it?
Well, in a way, even now. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, and perhaps it's a credit to me, was that I wasn't prepared to perjure myself. You know, to sign a legal, to deny something vocally is one thing, but to actually sign a legal affidavit is quite another in my book. And I wasn't prepared to lay myself open to perjury, so I fessed up, and at that point I was fired quite aggressively. And I then was taken on by another newspaper, and the editor of that newspaper then slightly hung me out to dry and lied to me in order to solicit further confessions from me. So at that point I was starting to be manipulated. But you know, you have to kind of step away from this, and of course I have over the years, and look at what the reality of the situation was. The reality of the situation was that I was kind of mentally ill. I mean, I was in the throes of active addiction. And while, you know, I can lash around, it doesn't profit me anything to blame anybody. I mean, I don't even particularly feel any animus towards the guy who grasped me up, actually, and it doesn't bother me, because the reality of the situation was I was riding for a fool. It was a high-wire act. And, you know, if it hadn't been that, it might well have been something else.
But it was a watershed moment in your life, wasn't it?
Yeah, it took me another year and a half or so to absolutely kind of realise that I had to stop completely, but then I did. You know.
At what level was your heroin habit and other habits?
Well, you know, they were 24/7, year in, year out. I mean, I think there's a great. I think we've spoken about this before, and I've used this expression, drug porn. And I think there's a kind of strange, and it, you know, since my kind of little drug porn incident, which it's really kind of is nothing to what you see happening to people like Pete Doherty and Amy Winehouse now, which is really it's sort of another, it's almost sort of, it's not just drug porn, it's kind of snuff drug porn. It's kind
well,
of,
this is why because I remember our conversation, your drug porn comment really sort of resonated with me. I was going to ask you about Pete Doherty and Amy Winehouse. What does someone like you think of the coverage?
If you think about Amy Winehouse and Pete Doherty, maybe Kate Moss, I mean, the way in which, you know, what I call the kind of drug porn media interest has grown and grown and grown, it puts my own, you know, travails in some perspective. Though, of course, I did have the bizarre sensation of actually going up to a newsstand and seeing every single newspaper in Britain with my face on it. But, you know, it was a moment and then it was over. But I think that it is the same process, and I think that the media is very interested in producing, is a kind of drug pornographer. But, you know, I'm surprisingly philosophic about that. I don't like it, I don't think it's good, I don't think it's moral, but I understand the motivation. I don't think it's the most evil thing on God's earth. You know, I understand that people who are often living rather continent and kind of constrained and quite moral lives, you know, get a form of abandonment vicariously from hearing about these people who are taking a lot of drugs, who are hanging out, just as they would get a sense of vicarious abandonment from looking at sexual pornography. So, you know, I do understand what's going on here. But, you know, if you ask me about, you know, what were the specific amounts of drugs you were taking, I think of that as a kind of drug porn question. It's like saying, you know, what were the different sexual positions you adopted, or how many partners did you have? It's kind of enough for you to know that I was involved in drug porn. It's just like asking, you know, knowing that I was a model for sexual porn. That's enough for you to know the extent to which it maybe brutalized me or damaged those around me, more to the point, without me needing to give you all of the gory detail.
How do you deal with remaining clean?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's a very interesting aspect of our culture. It's another interesting aspect of our culture. And, you know, I attend a nameless self-help group that remains nameless in the media for very good reasons. And, you know, there's been legal cases, quite high-profile legal cases connected with it. Many people misunderstand why it is that this self-help group wishes to remain nameless, or rather people connected with it don't wish to be identified as such. And it's for a very good reason, which is that if people are identified as such, then and they then don't stay clean, or if their primary drug is alcohol, they start drinking again, then it sends a very, very negative message to people who are trying to get sober or to clean up from drugs. And I think that's a good reason. I think it's important. I think it's very important that people don't be seen as spokesmen for any particular, you know, it's enough that people see me and see that I'm lucid and that I'm healthy and that I'm well. And then you know, if they want to get clean, there are very, very well established ways of doing that and then maintaining it that are easily available. And, you know, I hope they will. Because, you know, the last 8 years of my life have been infinitely happier than the preceding 16 or 20.